We were told Demerzel was incapable of clasping.
She was, but this signal isn't coming from Demerzel. Perhaps someone is seeking to embroil us in the struggle.
Alright, so let's talk about those final scenes from the Foundation Season 3 finale. Because just as Brother Dusk is relishing in his current victory, something strange was also happening. The Brazen Head finally made the connection, and then its eyes came to life. This thing was resting at the same place that Demerzel places her head when she's doing her maintenance. And for most of the back half of this season, this thing has been fought over. Brother Day and the Sandmaster literally went to war over it, and we all know the Sandmaster ended up dead. Day then had to drag it all the way back from Mycogen to Trantor, and now it finally does what it was built to do. It sends out a clasp signal. And for those who don't know what a clasp is, I have a full video explaining what it means so you can check it out. But it's basically a robot handshake, or like a way for two machines to link their minds across space when they choose to. And I think Day wanted this moment so badly because of how he betrayed Demerzel. He has seen, for lack of a better word, the light, and that's why he risked everything to get the Brazen Head back to Trantor in the first place. But then, ironically, it doesn't fully activate until after he's gone. And of course, after Demerzel is gone as well. But that timing is also very important because it almost feels like Demerzel's last act set this chain reaction in motion. It's like she left one final piece on the board before Dusk burned everything down. And this isn't your typical moment of sci-fi tech coming to life. In fact, this is the first confirmation that there are still some other robots out there. Because for a very long time, Demerzel has been treated like the last of her kind. So this signal tells us she was never truly alone. And now those other robots know something is up on Trantor. And they also know it's not from Demerzel, which means the galaxy just got way more complicated. Because if someone or something answers that call, we could be heading for a robot resurgence, or maybe even a war. And that's the real twist here. The clasp didn't just connect to anyone. It went somewhere very specific. And where it ended up changes everything. Carly's return. So this signal lands us on the moon, and this is where we see Kalle again, standing beside a tall, non-humanoid robot we've never met before. And that alone is huge, because until now, Kalle has mostly been a distant figure. She's the genius who solved the math that first drew Gale into Hari's orbit. But now she's not just a name or a memory. She's here, she's alive, and apparently running a hidden robot base we've never seen before. And they're not calm about the signal. Kalle and the robot are surprised that someone has called them, which tells us that this wasn't routine. They weren't just sitting there waiting to jump in. They had to be pulled in. Then comes the detail that for me changes everything. The robot points out that they've been told Demerzel was incapable of clasping. And that's very true, because Demerzel's programming kept her from ever freeing herself, which means this signal didn't come from her at all. And at that point too, we knew she was, I guess, dead, so it's obviously not from her. Which means the Brazen Head must have finished booting up after all that chaos and sent this call on its own. Which is honestly terrifying when you think about it, because that means this wasn't anyone's plan. It wasn't Day's or even Demerzel's. This was the robots choosing to step into the story again on their own, and Carly's response makes it even more interesting. She says, perhaps someone is seeking to embroil us in the struggle, as if she already knows exactly what kind of war this might start. And then of course that last line about all the pieces being in place. Doesn't sound like surprise? That sounds like she's been waiting for this signal for a very, very long time. And that's what makes this scene feel so heavy. This isn't just a reunion. It's the awakening of a faction that's been silent for centuries. The robots aren't background players anymore. They're about to join the struggle, as Kalle puts it, and the fact that she says it like that makes it sound like this moment has been in motion for generations. And then the camera pulls us in to reveal the most shocking part of all. The return to Earth. So then the camera keeps pulling in, past Kalle, the robot, and past the entire base, until we see where they are. They're on the moon, and hanging in the sky right next to the moon is the Earth. And talk about a reveal, because this is one of the biggest reveals of the season. For the entire 3 seasons, Earth has barely been mentioned. It's become a forgotten origin point, buried under thousands of years of history, and now we know it's still out there. And that Kalle has also been here all along as well, which is why I think the choice to put her on the moon isn't random. It makes Earth feel like a sleeping giant, just outside the galactic fight, but close enough to change everything if it wakes up. And with the clasp now active, it feels like Earth is about to matter again in a way it hasn't for millennia. This reveal also reframes the whole show, We've been thinking about the fall of Trantor, the fall of Empire, and the battle between the Foundation and the Mule. But this shot tells us there's a much bigger stage. Humanity's true homeworld is coming back into the story, and whatever Kalle is planning, it could tie the galaxy's future back to its past. Which is another reason I'm even more excited about Season 4, because that means it won't be just about darkness ruling alone or the Mule taking control. It's about what happens when robots, the Second Foundation, and maybe even Earth itself get involved. Who sent the clasp? Here's where things get interesting. The Brazen Head doesn't just light up on its own. It activates after Day follows Demerzel's instructions on how to check if it's alive. She acted like she couldn't help him, but she still guided him right up to the edge. And then, just as Dust started destroying the Cleon tanks, her programming forced her to leave. And Demerzel puts it as due to the programming hierarchy, which also makes the timing even more suspicious. And that also raises the big question. Was this Demerzel's plan all along? Because look at what happens next. On her way to the tanks, she runs into Ambassador Quint. In the middle of all this chaos, she gives Quint the necessary instructions to hand over the triangular book in her quarters to the head librarian, which also sets up the rediscovery of the Second Foundation. And then, of course, later on, the Brazen Head activates and sends out the class signal, waking up robots on the moon. And the wild part? The Second Foundation also has a prime radiant. So right now, there are two huge blind spots for Dusk. He has no idea he's not the only one holding a radiant, and he definitely doesn't know there's still another Cleon out there. Anyways, so I don't think that was a coincidence. If anything, it feels like a coordinated last move, like her way of making sure the galaxy keeps moving forward, even if she doesn't survive. And if that's true, it changes the meaning of her death completely. Maybe this wasn't just the end of Demerzel. Maybe it was the first step in liberating an entire network of robots across the galaxy. But that's also where things get dangerous. We don't know who's going to answer that call. Kalle seems calm, even satisfied, but she talks about being drawn into what she describes as the struggle, which doesn't sound like peace talks. Which means this clasp could be a message of unity, or a declaration of war. And that's the tension hanging over the entire ending. If Demerzel really set this in motion, was she trying to save the galaxy? Or just make sure the fight goes on without her? Either way, I think that move alone single-handedly made the galaxy just got a lot more crowded, and a lot more dangerous. What it means for Season 4. Now that we've seen it all play out, it's clear the finale wasn't just closing a chapter. It was setting up an entirely new war. And Season 4 was renewed even before the finale ended, so whatever the writers have up their sleeves will be interesting to say the least. The Empire as we knew it is gone. Day is dead, Demerzel is gone, and Dusk, who is now calling himself Brother Darkness, sits alone on the throne. But don't forget, Dawn is alive, but he's too injured to matter right now, which means Darkness controls what's left of the Dynasty. Even with Demerzel, is she truly dead, or will she be back? And even if she is, how will the Empire survive without her? Meanwhile, Gale might have won her fight with the fake Mule. But Bayta, whether she's the real Mule or another decoy, is still out there, with Torin and Pritchard under her control. And of course, there's Magnifico too, so the war is far from over. And just when that's already enough to shatter the galaxy, we get the Second Foundation stepping out of hiding, ready to shape the next chapter. We also know the robots may be waking up too, with Kalle waiting on the moon, watching, and ready to act. So all in all, this is no longer a story about a single war. This is a three-way battle for the future of everything, because we have Darkness versus the Mule versus the robots. And with Gale, the Second Foundation, and maybe even the rest of humanity caught in the middle. And that means Season 4 isn't going to be just about who wins. It's about who decides what humanity becomes next.